When the first survivor of a shipwreck finds out there's a second survivor, he commits suicide.
On November 13, 1961, an oil tanker discovered a man in a small boat waving his hands frantically in the middle of the ocean. Once he was rescued, he informed them that he was the captain of a ship that was destroyed by strong winds, killing all 6 passengers and leaving him as the sole survivor. 3 days later, a second survivor showed up, and everything began to unravel.
The Duperrault family had been planning their cruise for some time. Arthur Duperrault had been saving up to take his wife, Jean, and their 3 children to the Bahamas, and by 1961, they finally had enough money to go on their vacation. They traveled from Green Bay, Wisconsin to Fort Lauderdale, Florida to begin their journey, where they hired Julie and Harvey, an experienced sailor, to captain their voyage upon the 60-foot yacht named the Bluebell. They set sail on November 8, 1961, because they wanted to avoid as much of the cold Wisconsin winter season as possible. Over the next 4 days, the Duperraults traveled to various locations in the Bahamas and spent time enjoying the beautiful sands, snorkeling, and purchasing lots of souvenirs. Arthur stated at one point that it was a once-in-a-lifetime vacation. On November 12th, the captain and passengers boarded the Bluebell once again to head home. Captain Harvey's wife, who also joined them on the trip, prepared a meal for the passengers. No one knew at the time that this would be the last meal ever served upon the Bluebell. In the middle of the night, 11-year-old Terry Jo Duperrault awoke to the sound of her brother screaming for their father. She heard footsteps running around, stomping, and then silence. She laid in bed for several minutes in complete terror, before finally leaving her cabin to investigate the commotion. She went into the main cabin and saw her mother and brother lying in a pool of blood. She knew immediately that they were both dead. Terry Jo was horrified, but she climbed onto the deck so she could make her way to the front of the boat to hopefully find her father. It was then that Captain Harvey saw her and shoved her back down the stairs to the main cabin, yelling, "Get back down there." Terrified, Terry Jo ran back to her cabin and hid under the covers, but it wasn't long before she could smell oil and saw water entering her room. She saw Harvey enter the cabin with what appeared to be a rifle in his hand. She thought for sure he was going to kill her, but instead he turned and exited the cabin. Terry Jo exited behind him and went above deck, where she saw the captain once again. She called out, "Is the ship sinking?" And Harvey responded, "Yes," before jumping off the ship onto a small dinghy and floating out of sight. She had to think fast. The ship was surely going down soon. She remembered the cork lifeboat that was tied to the side of the main cabin, so she quickly untied it and got aboard just as the water started to overtake the cabin. Terry Jo drifted off into the darkness, afraid that she might run into the captain. But luckily, that didn't happen. Instead, Terry Jo was alone. She had no food, water, or supplies and was just floating there, in the middle of the ocean, and no one was even aware. For 3 days, she floated around by herself, sometimes accompanied by porpoises, but usually alone. And then, just when she thought she was on the verge of death, a Greek freight ship called Captain Theo discovered her cork boat floating. The crew pulled her aboard. She was safe at last. Terry Jo was now the second survivor of the Bluebell's sinking. Yes, you see, the day after the ship sank, an oil tanker discovered Julian Harvey's dinghy floating and rescued him. The story he spun to the Coast Guard was that the Bluebell was severely damaged by strong winds and he was the sole survivor. On November 17th, he was informed of Terry Jo's rescue. Upon learning of this, he reportedly said, "Oh my God, isn't that wonderful?" He then checked into a nearby motel and killed himself with a razor blade in the bathroom of his room. He left a 2-page suicide note which offered no explanation or apology for his crimes. Police suspect that Harvey killed his wife to collect her insurance policy, but was caught in the act by Arthur Duperrault, which prompted the remaining string of murders. Terry Jo went back home to live with her father's sister and 3 cousins. Nearly 50 years later, Terry Jo stated in an interview with CBS News, "I always believed I was saved for a reason. If one person heals from a life tragedy after reading my story, my journey will have been worth it."
To this day, no one knows why Julian Harvey decided to spare Terry Jo Duperrault. He had no problems killing her father, mother, older brother, or younger sister, so why did he decide not to kill this terrified middle child? Did he have a secret desire to be caught? We'll likely never know the answer to this question. Thanks again for tuning in to another video. If you're interested in seeing another horror story in this format, please hit the like and subscribe button, and comment down below if you have any feedback about this video as well. With that, it's farewell for now, and I'll see you in the next video.